Thank you for listening to the Following Films podcast. Today I'm joined by award-winning writer-director Philip Gelatt. I had him on the show today to talk about his latest project, First Word on Horror. This is a 15-part documentary series that delves into the lives, inspirations, and writing philosophies of 5 of the most celebrated horror authors working today. This season, the series spotlights Stephen Graham Jones, Paul Tremblay, Elizabeth Hand, Laird Barron, and Mariana Enriquez, taking us on a journey from the icy peril of the Iditarod to the shadows of Argentina's past, from the raw energy of the early DC punk scene to the eerie isolation of the Montana wilderness. Along the way, these authors share their stories, both real and imagined, blurring the lines between fact and fiction, offering a rare glimpse into the alchemy of storytelling. Philip, whose work includes The Spine of Night, Europa Report, They Remain, and Love, Death, and Robots, brings his unique vision to this literary love letter to horror writing and the sheer power of a well-told tale. So sit back, listen, and join me as I chat with Philip about the making of First Word on Horror. For more information about the series, visit etchstudio.substack.com. That's ETHSTUDIO.substack.com. Hope you enjoy the show. Hey, Philip, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I apologize. I was traveling this week, and on the way back from Dallas, I apparently caught something. So if my voice is off, it's just, yeah.
It's okay. I'm gonna preemptively apologize. This computer has been randomly crashing on me today, so if I disappear, I have brought my laptop. It's next to me. I will reappear as quickly as I can. So hopefully it doesn't happen.
So this could go sideways pretty quickly between the two of us. We'll see if we can make it work.
This whole thing could crash and burn. The wheels are on fire.
Well, I was so excited when I heard about this project. And not only just because it was something that you were working on, I always want to follow your work and keep up on what you're doing. But the particular authors that you chose for this project, these are all people whose work I was familiar with and that I enjoyed. So how did you choose these particular authors for this project?
So it started with way back when I was a teenager, loving horror writers and just sort of being fascinated by writers in general, and I have been my whole life. And this project specifically really started with knowing Laird Barron. So I had adapted Laird's novella 30 into the movie They Remain, and just got to know him and knew that his life had been relatively unique. You know, he grew up in the wilds of Alaska in the 70s. He raced the Iditarod and had various intense experiences. So, and also he's a very thoughtful and fascinating guy to talk to. So then a couple of years ago, he got very sick. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but he was incredibly sick and almost died. And when he recovered, I thought to myself, well, somebody needs to get Laird in front of a camera and get him to talk about both his life and his work and his philosophies. So it might as well be me. I'm here. I know him. I have access to crew and a camera. Let's go do this. So it really started. It really started with Laird, and we did that interview and cut it together, and it just turned out so well that my producer who I was working with was like, "Hey, let's go and get other authors and try to turn this into a series." Which isn't really your question. Your question was, how did I pick all of them? So let me.
No. But that's actually, it's really important though. That's good to know.
So once we had Laird, I wanted to get a diversity of voices, from the current horror community, and I wanted to get people who I knew had lives that were pretty interesting and unique. And then we just sort of like organically kind of expanded from there. So like I had already knew Stephen Graham Jones a little bit. I knew his life had been, interesting and that he was just a really fascinating, charismatic guy. He's got a real rock star aura about him, Stephen Graham Jones. Yeah. And then I knew we were going to do Paul Tremblay because I've been friends with him for a while. And Paul actually suggested that we get Elizabeth Hand, whose work I was aware of. I'd read some of it, but I hadn't really gone super deep into it. So I did a lot of research on her and thought she would be fantastic. And then the last interview we did was Mariana Enriquez, and I had read her work and just been floored by it. I've been describing it as like a face punch of
Hmm.
in a good way, in the best way possible,
Yeah.
like being punched in the face. And she's Argentinian, and she just happened to be in New York when we were shooting, and so I managed to get in touch with her and managed to bring her in as well, and that sort of rounded out the first five. I really want to do more, but we capped it at five basically to put it out there and see what people thought, you know.
Well, there's something that's really incredible that happens when you hear authors read their own work. For me personally, where the performance in my own head when I read people, it's not great. And I actually really like hearing an audiobook for a moment just as a something as a primer, something to get it started. And especially like Elizabeth and Stephen, hearing them read their own work is something that's really powerful and completely changes the work and the cadence and the way that I think about the work.
Oh yeah, completely. Elizabeth in particular in her
Yeah.
interview talked about being a failed actress, and you can now I don't know, maybe she would have been a great actress, but you I think you can hear that in her reading that she has thought about it like a performer would think about it, and that's
Mhm.
really incredible. And Stephen, I'm just gonna come back to that rock star comment. Like he just he just has a power about him, in particular when reading his own work. It was really it really draws you in, and I think, as you say, reveal something about it that you might not get out of it, either reading it yourself or honestly listening to an audiobook of it. It's always going to be just a little bit different, I think.
I agree. I completely agree. And it's something that there's almost with Steven, he's an incredible writer, but the way he performs it, it's almost so indifferent to the words that he's saying at times, where it's just so a matter of fact that it's like it's just really works for it. So
Yeah. He's very nonchalant about the violence.
yeah.
It's great. Yeah.
So then, is there anything you learned about because you're a writer yourself, learned about the writing process specifically for horror in interviewing these authors?
Yeah, I mean, I learned a ton. I would say, when you have been writing for a while, as I have been, I mean, you sort of have heard all kinds of different advice and all kinds of different sort of, everybody has their own advice. But even still, like it's pretty fascinating because every writer approaches it slightly differently. And so one thing, well, I'll say this: I think the best piece of advice in the series, and there's a lot of good writing advice in the series, but I think the best piece actually comes from Paul Tremblay, and it is comes by way of him um, pushing against common writing advice, which in the common writing advice is write what you know, which is every writer has heard that. Oh, write what you know, write what you know.
Sure.
And and Paul is like, no, that's awful advice. Like, do not write what you know. You should write what you're obsessed with because you're
Mm.
gonna do that anyway. And between you and me, if I only wrote what I know, I mean, what I would have
Ah,
written how to like make oatmeal in the morning and like make a peanut butter. Like I don't my life has not been that interesting, and so I thought it's fantastic advice. I'd never heard it put that way before, and I think it's just it's a good thing to hear for young writers in particular, because I think when you hear that advice, write what you know, it can be really off-putting because again, like not everybody has a life like Laird Barron. A lot of us have lives that aren't that way. So if
yeah.
you can identify your obsessions and things that are really occupying your mind constantly and use those to push your writing, I think I mean, it's great advice.
Well, the way that they all talk about violence and the way that they've incorporated that into their writing and the way that they think about these horrific things, it's something that would be going on in the back of their mind even without this act of writing. So it's something cathartic, I would assume, to get this out of your inside and put it out. So it just feels better for the most part when you get these thoughts out.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the that question that you sort of put in there a little bit, which is the like, is sort of one of the motivating ideas of the series, really, which is that we're very much presenting the biography of these people, and we're
Right.
in the visuals of the show, we're making you sit with them, and they're talking directly to camera, and you sort of we want you to like grapple with the human being, but then also with their work, and it is like I ask each of them like, what is um where does a story start, or where do you stop and where does a story start? Like what is it, like what is that where is the art and where is the artist, and what's the line between the two of those things? um and I don't think there can be any possible actual final answer to that question, but listening to them all grapple with it, I mean, all of them, I think all of them said at one point, and a lot of these moments have been cut out of the documentary, but said, oh, like writing for me isn't therapy. I'm not really, I don't know, I'm not my work. But then immediately, or within the next 10 minutes, they would say something like Stephen Graham Jones very much is like, writing is not therapy for me. But then 10 minutes later, he's like, well, I'm in all my stories. Every single one of my characters is me. And I was like, well, what? Like, okay, so which is it? But that's, I don't know, like those types of unanswerable questions are just fascinating to me. So it's just, I love listening to them talk about those things.
Well, for me, it was Stephen Graham Jones specifically. You see him in his work very easily that it does feel like a reflection of him and the
Yes,
violence
yes.
that he was raised with. And he had a very hard upbringing in a, kind of a rural farming kind of way where there was this, he was, excuse me,
It happened.
exposed to death so frequently that it's just he has a different attitude towards it than this kid like me from the suburbs that really never has dealt with violence in any way.
Yeah, I mean, never. I mean, so I'll say, we of those five authors, all of four of them grew up with violence either directly in their lives
Yeah.
or in Mariana's interview, she talks very chillingly about she grew up under the dictatorship in Argentina, and she's like, yeah, there was this moment when that dictatorship ended, and we became aware of how close we always were to violence, sort of without knowing it. So that's four of them. The fifth is Paul Tremblay, who grew up like us in the in the suburbs
Yeah.
of Massachusetts. And when I asked him to be in the show, or rather told him that I was requiring him to be in the show, he was like, "Hey, I'll do it, but like, am I going to be the boring one? Like, I don't, I don't," because he knows all their lives. So he's like, I didn't grow up like Laird. I didn't grow up like Stephen. Um, and I will say he's absolutely not the boring one. I think his interview is actually, I mean, it is as good as any of them, and really fascinating in terms of exactly what we're talking about here, which is like, yeah, he didn't grow up with any violence in his life, and still was sort of obsessed with horror and obsessed with um, a certain type of ambiguity in horror that really infuses
Yeah.
everything, and it's really I don't know, it's fascinating.
Well, it's that for me personally, I was scared of the world around me when I was a kid, and it was a way that I could safely handle those fears. And I could, later I came to appreciate some of the deeper themes and ideas. But, when I was in third grade and scared of thunderstorms, and when I was watching, something like Nightmare on Elm Street, it was a way for me to kind of build up courage. And then
Yeah,
after a while, I was just able to get some calluses in a very safe way.
yeah, that is a great way to put it. That is so. Another one of the questions that I ask all the authors is basically, what's the point of horror fiction? And they give differing answers, but Laird's answers is very much sort of what you're saying there, which is that the point of it is, he doesn't say calluses. He says it's like putting on a rebreather suit to go deal with dangerous matter. Like, you can do it safely.
Well, that's why he's him and I'm me.
Oh
So,
no, I like the callus thing. That was great. It was great.
but then, so when did you decide this particular style of this? Because you have something here that can get really dangerous very quickly when you kind of go into reenactments and visualizations of what they're saying. And I think you do it as delicately as you could possibly do because it's never distracting. It's something that always adds to. You never lean into it for too long to where when you go back to to them talking, the talking head piece, it doesn't feel jarring. It's just something that almost feels like this accent that you're throwing on certain moments.
So for those who haven't seen it, what you're referring to is, everybody in each episode, the authors are reading parts of their story, and we
Mhm.
are visualizing those stories through different means across the series. And that style, um, arose sort of organically. We did, like I said, we started with Laird. I just had him read, and honestly, I was like, I don't know if we're going to do any kind of reenactment, any kind of visual out here. I think my first instinct was like, no, we make the viewer sit with the words and they imagine it.
Yeah.
But as we shot more, I think it was, and then once we did Stevens, and it was like, okay, well, Stevens' story is about slasher film, and we don't have the money to go option or to go license money from slasher films, so maybe we can just, basically, my producer was like, what if we put the money together and we went off and shot our own little like mini slasher film? At which point I was like, well, obviously, like,
Come on.
I
Yeah.
would like to do that. And so once we had done that for Stevens, it sort of opened the box on this part of the style of the film, or of the series, which is that each of their stories are being visualized in a slightly different way. So Stevens, we went off and made this little sort of clips of a slasher film that doesn't exist. For Elizabeth's, we used two different forms of animation to bring that to life in a certain way. Um, Paul's is all old educational videos that we've recut to
Mm.
sort of punctuate his story. Laird's is a real, like, I don't want to call it black metal adjacent, like
Seems
super,
appropriate.
yeah, super dense black and white, um, snowy photography. That's really beautiful, slightly more abstract than the others. And then Mariana's is its own thing. We've got this amazing Argentinian artist who has done pieces of artwork that we're gonna. I keep calling that one like Reading Rainbow. Remember how in Reading Rainbow they would have like
Yes.
some paintings and they would cut as if there were cuts in
Hmm.
the paint. So it's going to be like the darkest Reading Rainbow episode you've ever seen. But my initial instinct, which was like this is a series about you know the like human authorship, human creativity. So I never want the visuals or the reenactments or whatever adaptation, whatever you want to call it. I never want it to overwhelm the fact that like the person who wrote the story is reading it to you. So it was always about, trying to be somewhat delicate in finding that balance.
That makes sense. And you mentioned when you were talking, you accidentally slipped in the word calling this a film. The
Yeah.
way that I watched it, it felt like a film because I was watching
Totally. Yeah.
episodes back to back to back. So
Yeah.
did you think of this in construction as something to be watched that way, or did you think of it as something just to be watched week after week?
uh, so I I originally was like, oh, it's a feature film. I am laughing because I continue to say to both the editor and my producer, what if we made it into a feature? What if, like, maybe it's a film, guys, maybe it's actually a film. Um, and then I was told very vehemently that nobody goes to see feature length documentaries about authors, and I was like, yeah, but maybe they would see this one.
Maybe.
I don't know. But so the process of determining this final form of it, um, I was going to keep saying this. It sort of arose organically. Like I knew that I probably wasn't going to be. It probably wasn't the smartest thing to turn it into a feature. And then I was like, okay, well, let's explore other modes. There are versions of these episodes that are 22 minutes, like a network half hour of television, and that felt, I don't know, sort of lame and unexciting. And so then we set on this idea of like, okay, let's have each author have more runtime, but broken up into more slightly smaller pieces, and see how that felt. And I feel pretty happy with that because ultimately it's giving us more time with each of the authors, and
Yeah.
that's what I wanted in the end. So so
Well, I mean,
yeah.
even in this form, I could have hung out with them for longer. It was
From your
something.
lips to my producer's ears, I will let him
Okay.
know.
Okay, please. Yeah. Because it's something that there was each one of these, there were common themes that kept coming up, but then there were also these new layers they were adding to this experience of it. And I think that anybody that does something creative, even if it's not writing, that they'll find something in here that they can relate to.
Oh yeah, that's my hope. I mean, I think there is, yeah, I think there's a ton of great. I mean, I keep saying using the word advice, and there's probably a better word, but for anybody who's ever thought about sitting down and doing anything, painting a picture, writing a story, making a movie, I think listening to people who do it and who have done it for a long time talk about, how they started. I mean, there's so many, like, I'm going to talk about another moment in Paul's interview where he talks about, I ask all of them, like, are you in control of your characters, or do they get on the
Hmm.
page and they have a life of their own? I think it's a really fascinating question. I personally have never really felt like a character had a life of its own on the page, but I know a lot of authors who do feel that way. Um, and so when I asked Paul about it, he has this crazy metaphor about how he thinks about characters in like binary code, where it's like a series, like every decision they make is like a one and a zero, and it's either like a one or a zero, like,
Yeah.
and then that equation like equals the character. And I'd never thought about it that way before. And it was really fascinating.
I think that becomes the ultimate truth, though, is there's not one way to do this. It is they're
Yeah.
all doing it in their own way. They all view it in a different way, even though there are universal, these sort of things, these common threads that go through all of them, that they all approach it in a slightly different way and that it means something different to them at times.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
do you find that writing means something to you? It means one thing when you're creating it, and then when you have distance from it, it can mean something wildly different.
Yes. I mean, I, I think, yeah, like distance from something that I have written myself is almost like necessary to the creative process. Honestly, this doesn't really come up in documentary. Nobody really talks about it this way, but like I, I have to finish a thing. I have to get that rough draft done, and then I have to like be away from it, and I have to be able to come back to it and look at it as if I hadn't written it. Because
Mm,
if I'm too much in it, then I can't like judge it and like make the changes that need to be made to it. So, um, which isn't really what you're asking, I don't think, but it's sort of adjacent to it.
yes.
But I would say this: I can't. I just once I'm done with the thing, I never look at it again. So I guess so I don't. So I can't. I don't even. I never have that experience of going back to it and being like, oh, this is I just
Not even Spine of Night. Is that something you can go back to with a slightly different
uh
process?
I haven't, but I bet I could.
You should.
That one I bet I could.
It's a good one, man. You should go back
Thank
to
you,
that
thank
one.
you. I mean, we are actively trying to get a sequel off the ground, so I will probably be required to go back to it at some point to try to, yeah, make sure that
It,
that's done properly.
that seems like such a difficult process to go through. I love the end result of that type of animation, but that is a very just seems like an almost impossible art form, and to create it that way and that rotoscope
Yes,
stuff is.
it's insane. I mean, Morgan, my partner on the project, I
Mhm.
mean, it's more insane from his perspective than mine because he's the one that does the animation. But I think there is something about like people who try to scale Mount Everest and rotoscopers. There's a similar like this like this might not be as grand if you're animating, but they are like. I mean, he is ready. He. I mean, he has basically said if he had the live action footage, he would just sit and he would do it every single day for forever because it's like sees that mountaintop and he's going to get there, one step at a time. So
Well, we need more rotoscope and we need more stop motion. I've seen stop motion popping back up again the last couple of
yeah,
years. We need more.
yeah,
We
for
need
sure.
rotoscope to keep coming back up also.
I completely agree. Completely agree.
So,
Yeah.
so then with this, when is this coming out? When is First Word on Horror coming out?
So First Round Horror premieres next week, which is the first week in February. And then we're releasing it like an old school television show, except via Substack. And by old school television, I mean it's a new episode every Friday. So every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, I think a new episode will come out, and it'll run from the first week in February all the way to early May. So it's
Great.
15 episodes in total. So
So was that decision to release it through Substack? Because that's pretty much the writer's domain at this point, Substack. And so, okay,
yeah, I mean it is it that so the Substack decision was I didn't want to go through the pain and annoyance of trying to sell this onto a streamer. So I was basically just like, let's not do that. Let's figure out something else. And I had sort of gotten into Substack. I follow a lot of Substacks, as I'm sure a lot of
yeah,
people do. And I had seen on there that they were like, oh, we can do video. We can do video now. Now most people on there use it to have video of a podcast. But I was like, I think you could use this for something else. So we're
yeah.
so we're trying it out to see. And also to your point, it is the place for writers, or wants to be the place for writers. So just it feels like a good match. But we'll see.
Well, it's kind of in the wake of Twitter going away. I feel like Substack just stepped up in that place. There was this
Yes.
used to be the place for writers, and there will always be that need for those
Yeah.
of us that actually enjoy writing still.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So then, a week out, are you letting go of the project at this point? Do you feel connected to it still? Or you're still talking about it? Could it be a feature film? So
I still feel very connected to it. I mean, so one of the reasons that I don't go back to watch things that I've done is because it's like well, I don't know how to finish that thought. I can't do it. This one, I think I will be able to go back to, if only because it's more about like people whose work I love almost. Like I will
hmm,
always, like I'm a fan of these people, so I will always, I think, probably be able to watch this one. That being said, I will probably always watch it and think, oh, that could like
do this
maybe,
different.
yeah, maybe I should have done that differently. But I have to still feel connected to it because we haven't locked the last episode, so I still have
Oh,
to. I still have. There's still work to be done. But I feel very good. I mean, I feel great about it, honestly. Like I'm incredibly happy with how it's turned out, and yeah, I hope that people really find it and appreciate it and love it, because I just think I love all these people. I keep nerdily referring to them now, because now that I know all their lives so well, I told my editor that I was like, oh, they're like the Avengers of horror fiction in my mind. Because I know, like, in 1975, Laird was here and Stephen was there, and like Liz was living in there. Like I know there's like whole biographies, and like thinking about them as, like, a super team is just the
I
thing
hadn't
that
thought
started
of this as like
happening.
super friends with
Yeah.
horror authors, but it
Yes.
does work that way for sure.
Yeah, I have fantasies of trying to get them all into like one room and like shooting something where like they're all actually physically in the same space. I don't think I'll ever be able to do that, but I would like to try.
What would you call it if you had those five authors in a room together? If it's Super Friends Justice League, what would be the cabal of writers? What would that be called?
I don't even know. It'd be like, well, so Liz refers to herself as an ink-stained wretch. I would call it the like League of Ink Stained Wretches United, something like that. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
perfect. Well, Philip, thank you so much for doing this today. It was really good to catch up with the latest thing you're working on. I really enjoyed it. And I think this is something that people should check out. If they have even the smallest creative spark in their body, this is something that I think people really get something out of it.
So thank you so much. This was a blast.
Get cell phone ring lit up on a nice night. I gotta say you got a cheese grater, boys. Acting like I meant to hurt, screaming like I meant to hurt. But bitch, I don't work for you anymore. Bitch, I don't work for you anymore. And it's hot inside of the sun. I could put you there, and it's hot inside of the sun. I would put you there. Yeah. And it's hot inside of the sun. I would put you there. And it's hot inside of the sun. I would put you there.